The real strength of self-directed IRAs is you get to keep more of what you earn. Again, because here come those proceeds back into the IRA account. So they're not diminished by tax. So those assets go back out into your next deal and you're compounding faster and faster. So your proceeds come back in. You want to put those back out to work. Your money has to work for you, right? The parable of the talents that we're going to talk about, our faith. I mean, good and faithful servant, let's make sure that we're using our money to the best of our ability.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. I'm your host today, Brett Swartz. In every episode, we feature some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with insights we need to reach the next level of faith, success, and impact. I'm excited about our next guest. She's out of the great state of California, and she's on a mission to help us take control of our retirement today, but so much more. We're going to be talking about unlocking $40 trillion of assets for your deals using self-directed IRAs and also so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Kaaren Hall. Kaaren, how are we doing?
Real good, Brett. Hey, thanks so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Gosh, from birth or whatever, No, I'm just kidding. No, I got into this space after being, first a broadcaster for 17 years, and then I made the logical transition into real estate investing. And I worked in mortgage and real estate and property management and all these things, got into the self-directed space, and 15 years ago, opened UDirect IRA Services. So I'm the founder and CEO of UDirect IRA Services. And this is what we do. We help people to take their retirement from where it is, move it into a self-directed account, and then use those funds to invest as, we say as UDirect. You can choose your own assets. So it's not like investing in market correlated assets where some fund manager is choosing for you. You can invest in what's called alternative assets, which is a long list of different kinds of asset classes.
Fantastic. And by the way, you can learn more about Kaaren Hall by going to udirectira.com. That's just the letter U, directira.com. Okay, so let's start right into the show, which is unlocking 40 trillion of assets for your next deals, right? So there's people who are listening here and they need to raise capital. They want to raise capital. And for the next business venture, the real estate development, their syndication, their fund, right? And they want to know how to unlock the 40 trillion of assets for their next deal. So Kaaren, what's the number one secret to doing just that?
It couldn't be easier, really. You just ask people who are interested in investing with you, do you have an IRA or do you have a 401k with a previous employer? Because if they say yes to that, they probably don't even know that they can move those assets from where they are into a self-directed account. And then those funds can be invested into the deal, like a debt or equity kind of a position.
Okay, it's really simple. So do you have an IRA or do you have a 401k with a previous employer? Because if you do, you can move those assets. You can call it udirectira.com and then they can set it all up. And then once it's all set up, then it can go right into your passive Reg D fund, your commercial real estate syndication, your joint venture LLC. Is that a fair summary so far, Kaaren?
Yes, it is. And also, and not just as an equity partner, but as a debt partner as well. So if you're raising capital, people can come in, and lend money, be the lender as opposed to the equity.
Excellent. So that's the number one secret is awareness, asking the question. What is the number two secret to unlocking the 40 trillion of assets for your next deal?
To just do it. It's really not hard. All you have to do is ask, because people have just I've just said 40 trillion, right? Sitting there. A lot of it's invested in the market, obviously. And only about 4% of it is in the alternative asset space. So a lot of people don't know that they can invest outside of Wall Street. So you're really educating them as you are raising capital. Like, did you know you can do this? And then they'll say, I had no idea. And then you can say, yes, you've been able to do this for almost 50 years, longer than most of your investors have been alive. And they'll be astonished because I'm sure most of your investors are sophisticated people. But a lot of people still don't know about this, I don't know, just kind of a niche, kind of a really cool thing that's been around forever.
Yeah, no, I get it. We're in a similar space, which we'll geek out here in a minute about. I wonder, do you get do you still get, or did you ever get like, oh, my CPA doesn't know about it, or it seems too good to be true, or what's the thing? Do you still
Yeah.
get that, or is that kind of like, is it finally like they're just okay, it's common practice, or walk us through what's going on with when the CPA is not sure.
No, it's not uncommon for that to happen. I mean, I've been in this industry 17 years, so sure, a lot of CPAs and even attorneys don't know about this. So I think as a good investor, you probably have a wonderful attorney and CPA advisor. But ask them, hey, have you ever heard about a self-directed IRA? Ask them, we can get into this later, but do you know how to file a 990T, which is a tax return for an IRA? We can go deep on that later if you like. But if they don't know what a 990T is, either they need to learn, or maybe you want to talk to another, qualified and competent tax advisor.
Okay, got it. I like that. So get really practical with them. Say, hey, ask them if you've ever heard of it, and ask them if they have 998T. And if they don't know, then maybe it's time to either encourage them to learn, or
Yeah.
B, move on. Right? Just make it really, really simple. I mean, it's been going on for 50 years, right? You've been doing it for 17
Yes.
years. But do you feel like it's from 17 years ago? There's obviously a lot more people who know about it now, so it's less likely you get that, or you feel like it's still about the same when you get the objections.
It's still about the same, and the reason is because we have people growing up, right? So we have a whole new generation coming up that doesn't really understand this, and so it's all the different generations, all the new generations that are learning about this as well.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Yeah, wealth without Wall Street, right? I feel like Wall Street is just, it dominates when it comes to IRAs, 401ks, retirement planning, and it's
Uh-huh.
just they just, oh yeah, that's just the group over there that takes care of all that, but hey, maybe they really aren't taking care of all that, right? If you could be getting into these alternative assets. So okay, so what's the next secret, right? Besides awareness, asking the question, going in and doing it. What's the next secret to unlocking the $40 trillion of assets for your next deals?
Well, you can talk to your investors and ask them. I said, do you realize how much your asset advisor is taking from the proceeds of your, stock market-based assets? How much they participate in? For example, I mean, financial advisors are great. They do their job. They have a real place in the economy, obviously, or they wouldn't be there. But a lot of times they're getting paid on assets under management, where it doesn't really matter how well that asset is performing. And also, every time you make a trade, they're probably taking receiving some sort of fee for every interaction. With the self-directed IRA, you've got, a setup fee, you've got an annual fee. For us, it's a flat fee. We ask you to leave a minimum deposit in there. But when your asset proceeds come back, we're not participating. We're not taking a fee for that,
Got
right?
it. Okay. So just talk to your investors and ask them, do you realize how much your asset advisor is taking? So what are the fees from your traditional 401k, traditional IRA? And then, so just kind of knowing your numbers, right? And then that could give them some of the motivation to say, not only that, but like maybe the performance is only about 8 to 10% on average,
Mhm.
and perhaps you could be hitting some bigger returns.
Yes.
What do you these days? What kind of returns are you excited about when you're looking at real estate or different alternative investments for IRAs?
Well, I mean, first off, we don't recommend any investments. Okay, so we are not selling an investment to anyone. So we're not competing against any asset sponsor or anybody raising capital. A self-directed IRA means just that. The account holder is choosing the asset. They're doing the due diligence, and they're choosing the asset. What we do is facilitate them being able to use their retirement to invest in like you mentioned, Reg D offerings and so much more, cryptocurrency, precious metals, raw land. I mean, it's just so many different asset classes.
Okay, got it. Excellent. All right. What's the next secret? Or if we ran out of the secrets, is there anything else that
No, I
comes
mean,
to?
yeah, I think the best thing is that the real strength of self-directed IRAs is you get to keep more of what you earn. Again, because here come those proceeds back into the IRA account, so they're not diminished by tax. So those assets, not diminished by tax, go back out into your next deal, and you're compounding faster and faster. So your proceeds come back in. You want to put those back out to work. Your money has to work for you, right? The parable of the talents that we're going to talk about our faith. I mean, good and faithful servant. Let's make sure that we're using our money to the best of our ability and raising that. And so that's what you want to do. And you're going to keep more of it because we're not participating and taking money out of that profit you just made.
Yeah, smart. Yeah, law of compounding interest rate, eighth wonder of the world, right? We can use 7% compounding over 10 years to double the money, or
Right.
vice versa, 10% over 7 years, we double the money. And that is being a great steward with the capital, right? Tax flow, not just cash flow, IRAs, 401ks. And if you can self-direct it, you also get the education, right? The part of that, the education, and hopefully you're empowered to make even excess returns that beyond just the traditional stock market. So interesting. So let's talk about tax as it pertains to capital gains tax. So I think we're in a similar market, right? We focus on the capital gains tax market as it pertains to highly appreciated assets that are not in an IRA or a 401k, that are not already in a qualified plan. This could be like a business sale or real estate, huge asset, 5, 10, 50 million bucks. They're selling, they have millions of dollars of gains, and they're looking to defer that tax. Most people, they only know about like the 1031 exchange. It's maybe like more like the traditional IRA. That's all they knew, right? The 1031 was all they knew. But I'm curious, like you're in your world, being in the tax world, what would you say is the biggest frustration when it comes to the 1031 exchange that you've seen?
We don't participate in the 1031 exchange. It's a different world from ours, a different universe. The 1031 exchange is your private capital, your personal capital. The IRA world is its own little universe, its own little bubble, this tax protected bubble. And so an IRA, a solo 401k, could be a traditional Roth, SEP, simple IRA, doesn't have capital gains because there's no tax, right? So there's no capital gain. So that's beautiful to begin with. So we're a different universe from the 1031 exchange, which is obviously a great way to defer earnings. But at the same time, it's a different universe from us.
Yeah, and so walk us through like the limits, right? Isn't there X amount of limit you could apply to the IRA and the 401ks, and if you're an individual business owner and there's the S corp, different things, like walk us through some of those little guardrails there, and then if there's any solutions for like, hey, I'm exiting a $30 million business, right? Is there any way to like, big old way, that's the part where maybe we can geek out a little bit here in a second, but let's start with the first one. What are some of the limitations?
Okay, well, I mean, there are the limitations, I suppose, would be contribution limits. And so every type of IRA has a cap. So the solo 401k and the SEP IRA, which is the simplified employee pension, has a contribution cap of $69,000. So it's a lesser of 25% of your income up to a cap of $69,000 per year for both those account types. Other different types of accounts have a much lower contribution cap. But the good thing is that there's no cap on how much your retirement account can earn from an investment. That's not capped, And what's also not capped is the amount of IRA accounts you can have. It's just how much you can contribute. An IRA can have also an unlimited, or any kind of retirement account can have an unlimited number of assets. The only cap there is the amount you can contribute out of your own pocket. But the proceeds are unlimited, which is fabulous.
Okay, got it. So basically about a little less than $70,000 per year is the limitation on the contributions, but the earnings are not capped. So now I want to geek out with you because you're still in the tax world, right? It's different than the private world. That's the world we're in, right? So I'll give you kind of an example of a couple of deals that we help people with. So we just did a $8 million C Corp business sale out of Colorado. It's 50 years in the business, right? And they inherited like 30 years ago. And anyway, so they got this huge capital gains tax. And they're looking at like 35 to 40% of it being just crushed. It's just gone, right? So instead, we built what's called a capital gains tax exit plan. And instead of just paying tax, they sold it in exchange for a promissory note to a trust instead of doing a promissory note to the buyer. It's a 3-party sale, and essentially they'll be able to defer the tax, and and then we can invest it into real estate, passive reg deals. You can also put it into stocks, Bitcoin, and different things. But you can diversify, right? And you have an extra amount working for you. The law of compounding interest, it works for business sales, Bitcoin, commercial real estate, primary homes, any asset of any kind. And the next one is it eliminates the estate tax, right? Mm-hmm. So the death tax is that 14 million basically married as of 2026 or 7 million single. Those are probably the exemptions most people think are going to be. So we eliminate that estate tax, right? So you don't get crushed by that government's mousetrap of just taking 40%, which the stepped up basis doesn't solve for. So does any of that resonate? I'm just curious, like when people call you, they're like, hey, and you're like, yeah, I wish there was like an IRA that could like grab all of that, right? But we
Yeah.
can't. But
Yeah.
like, what comes to mind when we look at this $84 trillion transfer in the next 20 years for the baby boomers, and
Right.
50% of their assets are tied up into these highly appreciated assets?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I suppose it's good to define what my wheelhouse is, and it's not giving tax or legal advice. There are some awesome tools for deferring, what will happen like in an inheritance situation with insurance and all these other kinds of strategies like you described that are brilliant. And that's where a financial advisor is really great to have in your corner. A self-directed IRA, our space is more nichey. So we're not advising you, we're not advisors. So what we're doing is executing your order. So what you could do is you could make contributions, assuming that the income is there. And so when someone does, say, pass away, what an IRA or a retirement account does is the assets immediately pass to the beneficiaries, and they don't go through probate. A retirement account is like a mini trust in a way. So the beneficiary of the account receives the money without it going through probate. There's no question it's predetermined at the time the account is set up. So we don't even open an account unless there's a beneficiary named, and the percentage of ownership is also established at that time. And so, say for example, someone passes away, they've got an IRA. Say they've got two children, 50-50. Those two children at the time of death they'll each get an inherited IRA. The money will transfer from the deceased's account in its incremental, predetermined percentage to the inherited IRAs, to the beneficiaries. And then there's a whole slew of rules that they need to follow. There's a 10-year rule. You can take it out, you can leave it. You may or may not take R&Ds, which is required minimum distributions. And it goes a little deep on that. What happens when you pass away for an inherited account? You have a lot of choices. It depends on whether or not you're a spouse. And if you are a spouse, if you're more than 10 years younger, I mean, it's a whole slew of like, if the moon was full on Thursday, then there's a special rule, so that's something, it's another topic to go deep on. But
Can I get into that? Sometimes that's,
yeah,
I think, some of the frustration with some of these things that the government sets up is the hoops you have to hop through, and you don't get the freedom and impact you want to have today. So let's just
right.
example. I want to make sure I got this. So let's say it's $100 million IRA, right? You crushed it, and you're like Mitt Romney. You put in like 5 million and went to the moon, right? And you're like crushing it, and you're all excited. So is that part of the taxable estate? Is that part of this? Is it outside or inside the taxable estate? Is the first question I have.
Okay, not an attorney, but it would probably be it would probably be an asset of the estate. But if you're the beneficiary, maybe it would be outside of the estate, right? Because there's an account and there's already a beneficiary, and whether or not an attorney will consider that part of the estate, I'm sure it's as an asset of the estate. So you would need to ask an estate planning attorney.
We're gonna ask right now live
Let's go live.
ChatGPT.
Let's
Let's
go to the
find out.
phones.
Hey, ChatGPT, if I have an IRA, my kids inherit it. Is it a part of my taxable estate subject to the death tax? Let's find out what they say, because I'm kind of curious.
My vote is no, that it is not.
Yeah, is an IRA a part of my taxable estate subject to death tax? That is the good question. And then the second part would be, if the kids, we're going to find the answer here in a second. Yes, your IRA is considered part of your taxable estate for federal estate tax purposes. That means that the value of the IRA at the time of your death is included in the total value of your estate, which could be subject to federal estate taxes if the total value of your estate exceeds the federal estate. Yes. So this means if you have an IRA as of 2026, we think the note's going to be about 14 million married, or just your total taxable estate, right? Your total tax base is above that amount, and your IRA is a part of that. That is inside of your taxable estate. So I think people need to be aware of that.
That's interesting because the IRA itself passes tax-free to the heirs. So it may be estate tax, but the heirs themselves
Yeah, there's
receive it.
capital gains tax, right? This gets confusing, right? Because there's a stepped up basis that most people think like is what
No,
covers the things, and maybe
no,
ours is different, right? But yeah,
yes.
there's different taxes, right? So by the way, everything that me and Kaaren are talking about, go check with your CPA. We're not giving you
Yes.
tax or legal advice. We're just trying to stimulate the questions and the thoughts, and you should be exploring, right? So yeah, there's capital gains tax, there's stepped up basis, there's different things that are tax free, but estate tax is something that I feel like is the government's biggest mousetrap. It's kind of like the end all be all. And by the way, ChatGPT could be wrong too. Don't count on ChatGPT to know what you're talking about either. But this, according to this, it is a part of your taxable estate, and you want to be aware of that. But go ahead, you were saying something, Kaaren?
No, and I think I already made my point that again, when you pass away, it's just like the IRA is something like a trust, and the heirs simply receive the retirement account. It just passes from A to B, from deceased to beneficiary, and there is no it's not a taxable event when that money passes or exchanges. And the dollars in there are tax free if it's Roth, or tax deferred if it's a like a pre-tax account, like a traditional or a SEP.
Yeah, and I'm also asking Google right now too, and Google says the same thing. Does an IRA owe estate taxes? That means if the estate is large enough, and it's possible, you will owe estate taxes on the value of an IRA. Estate taxes are assessed on the federal level only on very large estates. And by the way, they say only on very large estates. At one point, it was like $1 million for one
Right.
of the years.
Yeah.
And now it's at the largest right now, the amounts, it's like 28 million married because of the inflation, but it's cutting in half.
Right.
Right. And so just keep that in mind, that you always got to have a tax flow mindset, because you could be thinking, especially the worst is like, oh yeah, mom and dad said it was, tax free, and then all of a sudden they're like, nope, it's 40%. Right now, we have a solution where the other assets, let's say you had a $10 million IRA, but you had $15 million out of real estate, right? So totally you have 25 million, let's just say, right? Although you can't sell an IRA, you can't exit an IRA into our strategy, you can exit that other 15 million while you're still alive and get that outside the taxable estate without any insurance, no life insurance, no gifting, no charity required, on one sale in one day. And so that's where this comes into play, to know that, yeah, this is a part of it, but that means mom and dad may need or want to sell now, because otherwise they're assessing the whole 25 million and they're going to take 40% above the 14 million married mark,
Right.
which, 25, you can do the math real fast. 25 minus 14 is what, is 11 million. You take 11 million by 40%. That's $4.4 million of estate tax. That's just going to.
This is why, personally, as a business owner, why I have a boatload of insurance, life insurance, to cover this sort of estate tax scenario, because you never know when you might get hit by a bus, right? So I don't want to leave my kids with a surprise like that.
No, the cool part is, what if that boatload of insurance could just go to causes you believe in, and to go to the family that didn't have to pay for the estate tax. In other words, you solve the foundational root, you rip it out in the taxable estate, and the life insurance is just gravy. That's just a whole nother windfall. Think about the impact that can make, right? So that's part of what we're here at Build It to Billion, is like to think beyond just the traditional solutions. And I think that's where you're at with you direct IRA, right? The traditional blockbuster solutions of just sticking it into a traditional IRA or 401k with the stockbroker financial advisor is one way to do it, but it becomes transformational if you can direct it, right? And do different things. And so that would be my encouragement, to say, Kaaren, I see what you're saying, but what if that could be gravy and you can actually eliminate the estate tax altogether? That's the kind of thing, because it's $84 trillion in the next 20 years with these baby boomers. Yeah. It's a massive, I call it the reverse Tea Party. 240 years ago, the government, we fought for the rights of, taxation with representation and rights. And now we've built, the Lord's blessed this great American country with the biggest wealth in the history of the planet that we're aware of. But in the next 18 to 20 years, it's all transferring. Right? Yeah. And so that's the battle we're in. We're in the battle for freedom. And so who controls the taxes, right, or who controls the capital, to me, is probably the top way for who controls the country. So we have the political candidates going on right now. We have the different, things that we can pass, but who's going to control that big 84 trillion is the part where I'm like, we're focused on, if that makes sense.
So I think your wheelhouse might be something like the donor advised fund. That might be where you are a specialist.
Donor advised funds are great. We love donor advised funds. Our particular niche is called a deferred sales trust, not to be
Okay.
confused with a Delaware statutory trust.
Sure.
And it works for any asset of any kind. It's an installment sale with a trust. 27-year track record, thousands of transactions over 29 no change IRS audits. I bring up that tax question in the beginning because we've been doing it for about 27 years. I'm only 41, so the tax return CPA who created it, he's been doing it longer. He's the creator. Yeah. But I'm wondering, I was like, when are people going to really know? It's like, and you had a good answer. Like, there's a whole nother new generation that needs to be educated. I'm like, oh man. Oh, I was thinking we would get some traction here after 30 or 40 years, right?
It's crazy how little we really have. In 2009, when we had the Great Recession, I think that's when everybody sort of opened their eyes and realized, hey, we need to find capital someplace. Where are we going to find capital? We can't get a loan. Banks weren't even lending. And that's when I think, first off, real estate was being sold pennies on the dollar. You could buy notes, pennies on the dollar. And people really, investors really became glued on the self-directed IRA and this giant pool of capital that they could use for investing that had nothing to do with banks. And there was no limit on how many properties you could have in an IRA, like there is, the limit of how many properties you can have debt on, have secured by debt. I think every lender will say, what is it, 6 or 10? I guess it's varied over the years. Maybe it's 10 now. The self-directed IRA space just boomed in 2009 when I opened UDirect. It was a great time to open the company. And so since 2009, a lot's changed. The whole world's changed in 15 years.
That's great insight. Yeah, I think it's around 10 or 12 that the banks will allow before in your name before you have to. It's a whole other thing. Yeah, that's good to know that in a self-directed IRA you could have as many deals. It doesn't limit you. Kaaren, we're running out of time. Yeah. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's go.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget to make sure to tell yourself to do?
Don't worry.
Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended or given the most the past year?
Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich.
Love that book. By the way, just a little side note. There's a chapter, I think it's chapter 8, and he talks about the American Revolution, and he talks about the definition of purpose and decision. And I'm like, wow, it's probably 12 pages, but it's some of the most dynamic, amazing reading. If you've never read that, even just to see that it really came down to 2 people that were in a mastermind of another 54 eventually, but oh my gosh, it's so powerful. Please read that. Get that book. If you haven't got the book, and read that.
You could read that book in a weekend. Am I right? It's just such a fast read.
It's an amazing book. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Question number 3. What are you most curious about right now?
Oh gosh. The future. It's a big question mark, isn't it?
It's true. A lot of things moving right now.
But I guess who's in charge, so that helps.
Yeah, it's true. We'll find out. Hopefully, we will find out in a few months. The new election's coming up. The next question is this: number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by.
Just keep swimming. Dory the fish.
It's a great movie. Great movie. Finding Nemo. Next question is this: number one way you're using ChatGPT.
To perfect my blog articles.
It's good, right? It's efficient.
Yeah, I write them, and I have ChatGPT edit them for me so that they come out and they sound just better.
Make it sparkling. Yeah, I love it. Next question is this. Actually, it's the last question, and it's this. It's basically the foundation or the thesis of our podcast, which is practicing a mindset and actions of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles.
Yes.
So how do you best practice stewardship over ownership? And what is something that you're really passionate about to give back in the community?
My son is a pastor. He's in seminary right now. He's a youth pastor. And I've always been a Christian. And so with the advent of him becoming a pastor, I hear a lot about what he's learning. It's fascinating. It's so exciting. But I have some rental properties, and it just so happens, it just worked out that they're actually, I have renters who are pastors. So that's nice. So I can help the kingdom in this way. And I've got a donor advised fund, and that's another way. I'm sure you're involved with that. Self-directing, of course, but as far as, and that helps me with just having a nice a nice base of knowing that I'll be okay. But as far as the kingdom is concerned, it's incredibly important to, to be generous. I think that that's a huge theme of the Bible.
Absolutely. Kaaren Hall, it's been more than a pleasure to have you on the show. I want to thank you for being on the show, and I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts and talents of educating people to be empowered with their IRAs, to invest into, or not giving any investment advice, but to be open to the things they want to go back into, right? Empower them to go to things they want to go into, right? Versus
Absolutely.
being where they're at now. Keep doing what you're doing. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, can you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, the website, udirectira.com. You can see it behind me here. The letter U, udirectira.com. That's the
Awesome.
very best
Thanks, Kaaren. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to the episode of the Build It to Billions podcast. Again, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on your journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying biblical billionaire principles. Our ultimate goal to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more, all of it away to help MVPs. If you're curious about how to exit highly appreciated assets, defer the capital gains taxes, we wrote a book on it called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. Start today the planning. You have to plan, do this before you exit. This could be the $5 million Bitcoin, business, real estate. Get a plan in place so you can defer that tax and compound your wealth. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to get started, or go to Amazon and pick up the book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. Appreciate everyone listening out there. Please rate, review, subscribe, share this so someone it can be a blessing to, and we'll talk to you again all real soon.